This is a production of Cornell University.
So soil salinization and land degradation, testing the long-term viability of irrigated lands. Let me just start by acknowledging the hard work of my students. Isaac Kramer, he was a PhD student. Right now he teaches at Rochester Institute of Technology. Taiwo Adeyemo was a master's student, and now he's a PhD at Ben Gurion University in Israel. And Yuval Bayer was an undergrad, and he right now is a graduate student at the Weizmann Institute in Israel. So the hard work they did is what I'm going to talk about today. So just some motivation about the question I am dealing with today. Here we see a world map of salt-affected soils, and in colors we see regions. We'll go to this map in a little while. We see regions that are most affected by soil salinization, and this problem, we think that it affects about 10% of total global land area. So 10% appears a few times. 10% of irrigated croplands are affected, and also 10% of rain-fed croplands. And more than 2/3 of global salt-affected soils are in arid and semi-arid areas. And all those numbers are very uncertain. It is hard to know precisely, but those are some estimates of this problem. Soil salinization impacts agriculture in two ways mainly. One is directly affecting crop yields, and the other one is through changes in soil structure. So I will be focusing mainly on the changes in soil structure and not on yields. And other associated processes to soil salinization are erosion and soil compaction. So one of the major culprits of soil salinization is irrigation. Well, I'm speaking specifically of drylands. So of course, there's not enough rainfall to sustain crops. So we have to bring water. And whenever we bring water to the field, some amount of salts are dissolved in the water there. So water evaporates, and just the salt stays, or the plant uptakes water. And often most of the salt most of the salt in the soil is left in the soil, and it's usually not taken by the plant, such that salt could potentially accumulate in the soil over time. Now the solution is, there's only basically one solution what to do with those salts, is to bring more water, either if it rains or more irrigation water, and wash the soils from those salts and drain this water. You can bring this water elsewhere, or it could go down to the groundwater. But in order for salt not to stay in the topsoil, it has to be leached. The guiding questions for today are two. Can soil degradation due to salinization be irreversible? So, the second question is, will we be able to maintain sustainable agriculture in decades to come? And those two questions, they are important for our future, the future of drylands worldwide. And we have a cautionary case that here I bring. It's from Daniel Hillel, the collapse of Mesopotamian civilizations. There are many reasons why civilizations such as the Sumerians, the Babylonian, the Akkadian, why they eventually collapsed. But we can associate part of the reasons, we can associate with soil salinization. Over time, the water table where they conducted agriculture, it rose, and it brought salt from the groundwater to the root zones of the plants. So it increased soil salinization. We see a clear transition from wheat to barley. So wheat is relatively sensitive to salt. So those civilizations responded to these processes of salinization, switching crops. And eventually there were declining yields and a northward migration from where salinization began, where the mouth of the rivers are in the Persian Gulf, and they went northward where we have higher soils. So it's not 100% because of soil salinization, but it definitely is part of it. So supposedly we want to learn the lessons and, well, not do it again. Let's see how we're doing. So the first part of the talk is about irreversible salinization. So this is an animation. I'll play it in a second. So those are soil aggregates. And so this can be irrigation water or rainfall. So it falls from above and it goes into the soil and permeates it. Now, when you bring soil into the salt into the soil, and in this case, a specific salt is sodium, you see that the aggregates, they expand and they the soil can become impermeable to the flow of water. So this is one in a cartoon way, an easy way to understand what's the danger of soil salinization, and here specifically sodification. So I'm not specifically talking about the total amount of salt in the soil. There are many kinds of salt. We can talk about calcium and sodium and potassium and magnesium. Those are the major ones. Specifically, sodium is very common, and it causes the soil to expand and to become more impermeable to the flow of water, and that's a big danger. So this would be the structural changes in the soil. This phenomenon has been known for forever. This is a graph from a paper from 1966, and it's pretty. Most of the graphs I have here, they have the same axis. So let's understand them. Here we have salt concentration. So as you go from left to right, the water in the soil becomes more saline. And on the vertical axis, we have hydraulic conductivity, which as you go up, the water flows through the soil faster. So this is a classic experiment that we test how our soil's permeable or not to the flow of water. So these experiments go like that. We start with flowing high salinity water through the soil, and slowly we decrease the salt concentration, and we go from right to left, and we see that as salt concentration goes down, the soil become less and less permeable. So the video from before showed that the more sodium we have, specifically sodium, the less permeable it is. And counterintuitively, maybe, the more total concentration, this is also the lower the concentration, also the lower the permeability of the soils to flow. There are chemical reasons for that. It's also that's related to soil chemistry of the complex, soil complex, and the double layer in the soil, and I will not go into that. But if you put very clean water, distilled water, in the soil, then it doesn't allow the water to flow. Here we see SAR, different values of SAR. SAR is a measure of the sodicity, the amount of sodium we have in the soil. So the higher, the more sodium, the higher the fraction of sodium in the soil. So usually we see this kind of graph, and we see that this is a clear process of degradation. Degradation because the hydraulic conductivity goes down, and we want healthy soils that can let water and air pass through it so that the plants can do their thing. Most graphs we find in literature, starting from this in 1966, until basically today, they show this kind of picture. And the problem with this kind of picture is it only shows the process of the degradation of the soil. But I'm interested in asking, yeah, after it's degraded, what will happen if we go back and we increase either the salt concentration or if we decrease the levels of sodium? Will it go back? We have no idea from this graph. And I am not an experimentalist, and I wish I found this information on literature, and I didn't. So then Taiwo made an experiment, my student, and this is what we did. We did both the degradation and the rehabilitation, and we want to see where will it go. If we go back from the same way here, then no problem. There is reversible process. You decrease, then you increase back again, no harm. But if it goes down, when you go back to the previous conditions, if the conductivity doesn't go back up to its previous conditions, then I call this irreversibility. So let's check that. So we do that by conducting soil column experiments. So we have here water with either sodium or calcium cations, and we make it flow through the soil column, and we measure the conductivity of the soil column, and we switch the quality of the water. And this is a classic Darcy experiment, and we switch the quality of the water, and we see what happens. So, and this is, you see, lots of columns. And this is the experimental setup. So basically the same kind of graph. On the horizontal axis, we have concentration. So when you go to the right, you have more saline. And when you go up, you have faster flow. Same axis as before. So let's focus. And here we have three kinds of soil: sandy loam, sandy clay loam, and clay. The expansion of the soil due to sodium cations, we can associate that with the amount of clay in the soil. The more clay, the more we expect the soil to expand and become impermeable to the flow of water. So we tested that for different concentrations. So this is 10%, 25%, and 45% clay. So let's focus here. So we start from here, and this black arrow says that we should start reading the graph from here. So we start with high concentration, and exactly as in the 1966 paper, we see a degradation in the hydraulic conductivity. But then we stop and we go back. We increase again the concentration, and it's interesting to see that if we stop either here or here or here, there's no problem. Maybe you can't see the colors here. There are dashed curves in color. So if you stop early enough, no problem. The process of degradation, there's little degradation, and it is completely reversible. But if you go to lower and lower values, when you go back to 60 or 70 or 80% of the original values. So this is us measuring the irreversibility of the degradation process in different soils. And as expected, the more clay we have, the more irreversible the process we find. So those are, this is the part of the experiment. Now, we modeled that. We want to understand how, conceptually, how to make sense of the irreversibility. In the second half of the talk, I'm going to simulate the future and the future of, I don't know, agricultural lands. So I need, in the end, that's my goal. I want to make a computer simulation. So I need to use what we learned from the experiment and somehow code it in the computer. So we need a model now. I don't know, okay. We used a model for irreversible processes. This is the Preissach model. It was originally developed for physical processes such as magnetization. You can have a magnet and it can become magnetized or demagnetized depending on the temperature or the magnetic field. So that comes from physics, but exactly the same conceptual framework can be useful for us to describe here. And the basic idea is that we have, this is like a toggle switch. This is called a hysteron. So we have two thresholds, alpha and beta. So let's say this is low hydraulic conductivity and high hydraulic conductivity. And this axis, maybe you can think of the concentration of salt. So if we start from high hydraulic conductivity and you decrease the concentration, then you go down here. But once you go down, in order for you to go back up, you don't go back up with the red curve, you go with the blue. So this is another term for that is hysteresis. For me, hysteresis and irreversible processes, they are synonyms. And the exact location of these thresholds where you would expect the hydraulic conductivity to react to either salinity or sodicity, well, how do we know those thresholds? They can be anything, so we simulate them all. So in this kind of triangle, we have all possible combinations of thresholds. And this is the time for me to stop talking about the model because, it will take 15 more minutes just to talk about the model, but this is doable. We can use this framework to describe these processes from before and eventually derive, here I hope you can see, we derived reversibility indices. Well, the reversibility index and the degradation index. As you go up in the index, you increase the likelihood of either degradation or of the rehabilitation of the soil. So we have those from those experiments, those three kinds of soils, and we can ask, what is the likelihood that I do manipulations to the soil, either in the lab or in the field, and what is the likelihood that it will eventually be degraded, or what's the likelihood that it will come back and, well, it turns out that it can rehabilitate. So we quantify this by those indices. The one thing I should point out in this graph that I think it's useful for, to take home is that usually we think of clayey soils more, it is harder to make clay soils rehabilitate. That's everyone's expectations, and that's more or less what we find. But you see the clay is the black, and the sandy clay, this is 45% clay, and this is 25% clay, and it's not necessarily always the case that the clay soil, well, this is one specific clay soil with one specific mineral. It's not always the case that the more clay we have, the less, the lower our ability to make the soil rehabilitate. And also one other thing that we can learn from that is that the ability of the soil to degrade and its ability to rehabilitate, they are not necessarily connected. You could be good in one and bad in the other way around, and all that depends on the fraction of sodium and calcium. So it's a complicated picture. Two take-home messages from this first part. Let me see. Yeah. So yes, soil degradation due to salinization and solidification can be irreversible, as we measured and as we modeled. And the soil's history of salinization and solidification will determine the likelihood of degradation and rehabilitation. Maybe in order for us to understand the significance of those outcomes, I think this is, if I were to read that, 10 years ago, I would say, yes, that's obvious. And I think soil scientists in general will look at this and say, yes, pretty much what we expected. But until then, nobody did that. You can find in the literature sentences at the end of papers, yeah, we expect that, or it is known that. But in my mind, these kind of experiments were were the first, and I don't know if someone did them again. This is very labor intensive, by the way, but it is very important as well. It will have great implications in when we talk about sustainable agriculture, and I put a question mark when we talk about drylands in specifically. So this is from FAO's global map of salt-affected soils, and it shows many processes. And then here you see many cations. The salt cations, they can come through irrigation that I mentioned before. They can come from below, from the salty groundwater, as I mentioned that it was the case in the Mesopotamian civilizations. And if there is not enough drainage of the soil, then you can have an accumulation. And you can have drainage through the irrigation water itself or the rainfall. So just to give you a sense of the dimension of the problem. So this is FAO's map of salinization. And this would be what's written here: proportion of land salinized due to irrigation. And this is my local neighborhood, the Middle East. This is Israel. So you see shades of red. This is the Nile, Iraq, Iran, everywhere you see that. So we can scroll and see how is, okay, you can see Pakistan, India, wherever. It is mostly a problem for drylands. So let's go to North America. Let's see how North America is doing. So here, yeah, I will focus in a little while on this region here. This is the Central Valley in California, great powerhouse of agriculture, and I'll deal with this as a case study in a little while. So I will be focusing on the sustainability of agriculture in drylands, given that we are seeing right now climatic changes and we expect them to continue in the future. And to begin with, drylands do not enjoy ample water resources. When you do bring water as irrigation, it can be through you can bring water from the groundwater, and often it is brackish water, or you can bring any other kind of water you have access to. So the problem in irrigation is to bring salt from below, or we do that a lot in Israel. About 85% of domestic use water is treated and goes eventually to agriculture in Israel. So for us, a great source of salts is from treated wastewater. And we rely on the wet season rainfall to wash the salts from the topsoil layer. But what happens when rainfall regime changes? We can be talking about the length of the season, the how strong are the rainfall events, and what happens when we have hotter and drier atmosphere. So you increase the atmospheric demand. For that, we developed the salt of the earth model, and it is a model. Well, what the model can mean many things. In this context, model here, we wrote 3 ordinary differential equations, and they are all coupled. The first equation is a water balance equation. We have water coming into the soil system, either from irrigation or rainfall, and water can go out through evapotranspiration, leakage, or it can come also from below, from groundwater, and can go out through runoff. So we have one balanced water equation for the balance of water. We can track where are the salts in our system coming from and going to. So when it rains, rainfall doesn't bring any salt to the system, but irrigation can. So we can describe the quality of the water, therefore how much salt we're bringing to the soil system. We can describe some amount of soil going into the plant and salt leaving the system as leaching. In our models, we did not use this example when we actually ran the simulations, but the model can also describe salt coming from below, from the groundwater. So that's the second equation. And the third equation, it describes, so we talked about water, and then salinity, and this would be sodicity in order to tackle the specific problem of sodium. So we have to keep track of the cations that they are part of this, of the salt in my system. Here we make an assumption. We deal with the two major cations, which are sodium and calcium, and each one pulls the salt in a different direction. Usually the sodium will cause the aggregates to expand, and it lowers the hydraulic conductivity, and calcium does the opposite. So there's a tug of war there. So we have a model, and we have the ability to simulate this model and take into the consideration what we learned from the first part, that salinization and solidification processes, they're not always reversible. Once you degrade the soil, you can get stuck. And our case study is, as I mentioned, the San Joaquin Valley in the Central Valley of California, in the southern part. This is a typical Mediterranean climate, so which means that we have quite distinct seasons. So in the summer is hot and dry, and therefore you need to bring water as irrigation, and you rely on the winter rains to wash the topsoil from the salt. And we chose this region. In another paper, our case study was Israel, because we're from there, and the climatic conditions are pretty similar. We chose this as the best case scenario for drylands, because this is a rich region, super important for agriculture, and we want to study what we think will happen there in the future, and that's the best case scenario. That's the ceiling. So we ran the model in many ways. We have a weather generator, and this would be my colleague Nadav Peleg's baby, this model that can generate weather conditions as we wish. And so we have the ability to explore what will happen when we have increased evapotranspiration. So here we expect the temperatures to rise, so it increased the atmospheric demand. What will happen when we have shorter rainy seasons, and what will happen when you have more extreme rainfall events? Maybe the total amount of water in the winter will not change so much, but if you have less events, each event is stronger. This is very important. If you remember from one previous graph, maybe I should show you again. So I mentioned that when we have low salt concentration water coming into the system, the hydraulic conductivity goes way down. This is rainfall or distilled water, but rainfall usually has very low amounts of water. So the thing that we should pay attention here is that during the summer, you bring salt to the system, probably sodium, and it accumulates over the summer. And then winter comes, it rains, and it washes the soil, but maybe the topsoil layer cannot be leached of the salt because the hydraulic conductivity goes way down when you make clean water flow through it in a soil that already has so much sodium in it, if I make myself clear. So what do we learn from those? This is one graph of the paper. So basically, we see how the relative hydraulic conductivity, saturated hydraulic conductivity, so you can think this is the speed in which water flows through the soil, and this has been my proxy for soil stability. So the higher, the better here. So more to the right is better. And you see that as you increase temperatures and evapotranspiration, so the curves shift to the left, and left is bad. It is harder for water to flow through the soil column. The picture is less clear when we make the rainy season shorter. It doesn't change much. And it changes a little bit when you have more extreme rainfall events. It does change. So let's compare the black. I'm comparing always the black with the red. So the red is a little bit to the left of the black. So it makes life a bit harder when you have more extreme events. So we see that we expect the greater contribution to degradation to be the increase in evapotranspiration. And this is the one factor that we are most certain about. When we have projections of how the climate will be in Mediterranean areas, including the Central Valley in California, the uncertainties are big, but they're big with respect to rainfall, but they are much lower with respect to temperature. And here we see that temperature is, according to this study, the biggest contributor. Also, the strength of the rainfall, so more extreme events, are associated with high temperatures. So they could feed back. So the take-home message, part 2 right now, what did we learn? That irrigation with poor quality water can lead to long-term soil degradation. Of course, the details matter. What specific soil are we talking about? What are the minerals? We have to characterize, as we did, what kind of irrigation water are we using, what crop, everything matters, of course. Climate change, so higher evapotranspiration, rainfall regime changes will increase degradation risks. And because we have so many factors, and maybe half of them or more are human related, so what I'm talking about, our choice of irrigation water or of our crops. So solutions are possible. Of course, I could make easily in the simulation the irrigation water quality better. But what does that mean in real life? Do farmers have access to this kind of water? Or will you build a desalination plant so you can mix water from here and from there? So all those are policy and economics questions, which I did not touch, but for sure it will influence the outcome. We believe that richer regions such as California or Israel, they will be able to cope and adapt. And what will happen in other areas that I showed in the graph is less certain. So I would like to acknowledge again the 3 students involved in this research, and thank you for being here. Yes.
Hey, thank you for the talk. I'm curious about your initial experiment that you showed with the columns and the 3 different soil textures. You pointed out that the recoverability index of the clay soil versus the clay and loam soil was closer than you expected. But I'm curious if you normalized for the cation exchange capacity of the soils or even the clay mineralogy, because it can vary so much.
So if I were to normalize those values by the cation exchange capacity of each of the soils, so the more clay we have, the more sites.
More so the mineralogy of the clay.
The mineral, yeah.
A 1-to-1 clay or a clay that's going to shrink and expand and catch more of those salts, because that clay may have more capacity for the salts, and then it may have a different recoverability index.
Right. So in this study, we used 3 soils that we find in Israel, and we sampled one with low, medium, and high clay. And we did not play with the mineralogy of the soils. Just to see those, this is 2 years of very hard work from a master student, and I wish we and the community came on board to measure many other kinds of soils, and then, so the answer, I have no idea what's the role of mineralogy, and I wish we did, but we require experiments for that. Yeah. So of course, I did this experiment with 3 soils from Israel, and then I can learn a little bit what are the possibilities in the universe. But then I go talking about, I don't know, what happens in California, which I don't know the Californian soils. So so using the pun, take this with a grain of salt. And yeah, we don't know enough about how different soils will be irreversible, if irreversible processes will happen. We expect they will, but we don't know how until we measure.
Thanks for the talk. Is the irreversibility tied to the change in soil structure?
Yes.
Okay, because I was curious, because we know about the netic horizons and the columnar structure. I mean, did you see these, when you get to that certain point on your curve, did you see these? Because you weren't working on field soil, so I don't know.
So the change in saturated hydraulic conductivity is definitely the outcome of changes in soil structure. In this part, so we did measure the expansion of the soil. So we do see that in this part, it seems to be reversible. Usually in the literature, we talk about 2 phases. First, you have the expansion of soils, but it's like an accordion. You can do this and it's reversible. But once the clay platelets, they get too far from each other, then they can be dissolved in the water and they can clog the pores. And this is what we see here. Here, the experiment was so hard because hardly any water was coming out of the column, and we have completely destroyed the soil. And we do see changes in the soil structure, but we did not take those soils before and after for a CT scan, and so.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So for the experiments, I was interested in the values that you're calculating. Were they based after breakthrough in these columns? Because, I mean, initially, but I mean, and also like to capture that hysteresis, wouldn't you want to have the whole picture and not just the post-breakthrough? Because post-breakthrough is a different nature as you're describing for the soil.
Yeah, every point in those graphs, it is after equilibration. So we are here, and then we exchange the bottle with different kind of water. So in this case, I don't know, same fraction of sodium, so to speak, but smaller concentration. And then we wait until the concentration that is going out of the column is the same as coming into the soil. So we throw all the transient out. So because usually, we describe the saturated hydraulic conductivity in those terms. The physics and chemistry of the transient is fascinating, but we did not consider that at all.
I was also curious how you incorporated the hysteresis term in the model.
The hysteresis term, how it is incorporated into the model. So in the model, I did not show the equations. I didn't think it was informative in any way. But we have in the first equation, which is the equation for the balance of water, we have for this to occur, for water to flow from the top soil layer to deeper soil layers, we have a term that is, it has in it the saturated hydraulic conductivity. And this, instead of being a fixed number, it is itself a function of the other variables of the system, which would be the total salinity and the fraction of sodium in the exchange complex. And that, yeah, this becomes a function itself. Mm-hmm. And to the best of my knowledge, you can find, we did one study of what we think will happen in such and such conditions in the future. Of course, other people did that before. To the best of my knowledge, it makes a difference how you run simulations. This salt of the earth model is the first, and I should venture to say only, one that has a module where you can even contemplate irreversible processes. If you do simulations maybe you heard of hydras, and I use hydras and I like it and everything is good and well, and it does have a module that deals with that. If you go into the code, you'll find that it assumes implicitly total reversibility. If you change the quality of the water, immediately it goes back to where it was before. So yeah, you can run simulations all day long. I'm not saying that hydras is bad. I think we should have a updated module in hydras that takes into consideration the same kind of module that we have here. Yeah.
I'm very curious about in your first experiment, whether duration matter to the irreversibility.
The duration?
The timing you added.
So, yeah. So first of all, each point here in the graph is after we waited a very long time for equilibration of the water coming in and out of the system.
How long?
So, okay, so when everything is going well, which means water is flowing nicely, well, this is normalized, so normalized by 1. So here, water is super fast, like jets of water. This is 1, but it is super slow, so like dripping water. This is 1 drop every 10 minutes, and it's impossible. So if actually, yeah, so sometimes we don't know we can't guarantee we reach equilibrium, but once the soil structure is destroyed, it's game over. Doing experiments in the soil columns becomes impractical. You can wait for the longest time, for days, to accumulate milliliters of water coming out. And I don't know if that's related, but well, when I say irreversibility, I mean hysteresis. You can go back, but you have to put more effort. So maybe the word maybe can be interpreted as you will never go back. No, you can. So that's not my claim. You can. First, you can put lots of calcium and amendments into the soil, so you can. But it will take a while. So my claim of irreversibility is that it may take a long time or lots of money and lots of resources. And if you just leave things as is, without putting effort, then it can take thousands of years for sure. All right, thank you very much.
This has been a production of Cornell University, on the web at cornell.edu.